We all do it, don't we? We all assume, we make assumptions. It's almost like we live much of our life projecting these thoughts and ideas that really aren't true, or we don't know whether they're true or not. My dad used to say it this way in his kind manner. Take the word assume, keep the first three letters and get rid of the rest, and well, you know what you have, right? That's what assuming makes of us. The art of assuming, I call it the audacity of assumptions. To have the audacity to look into someone else's life and to create this story that usually isn't true. Or to come up with these suggestions or ideas that have no basis or foundation whatsoever. The audacity of assumptions. But I want to look at as well the idea of internal assuming. The audacity to assume things about yourself that you have no rhyme or reason to assume. For instance, I often hear people say, and you've heard it, I've often done it, maybe you've done it. You hear people say, or you say to yourself, I could never do that, when you've never tried. Or you say things to yourself, or you hear people say, oh, that will never work, when it's never been tried. And so the audacity of internal assumptions is actually one of the gravest mistakes in life we could make. The opposite of audacious assumptions is actually courage. The courage to say, no, I've never done this, but I'm willing to try. I'm not sure if something is going to work out the way I would like it to, but I'm going to try. I'm not exactly sure what today has in store, but I'm going to walk out the door with courage and with boldness and assume nothing. And it's the same when we engage with other humans, right? It's the same when we see a stranger walk upon us and our mind starts playing these tricks and we write this whole story about this person before we ever even mention a word to them. And so we go in with these unrealistic expectations. And the interesting thing is, most of the time, the assumptions we make are so far from the truth. When I teach classes each year with a group of teenagers, I rarely give an introduction. And I'll go through about 8 to 10 weeks of the class. And I'll never give an introduction. I don't really share stories about myself. I'm just there to be a facilitator of their self-discovery. And usually about week 10 or 11, I take one session of the class and I just say, it's your turn to ask me questions. And I do that for a few reasons. I do that because I love keeping the curiosity, right? Like the students are sitting there for 8 to 10 weeks and I've kind of earned their trust and I've earned a little bit of their respect, yet they don't know anything about me. But I also do it because it's a little bit of a psychological, what we might call a Jedi mind trick. It's this idea that if the kids don't know anything about you, they have to deal with their own assumptions. In other words, this guy walks in the room in week 1 and he begins helping us discover all these things about ourselves and work together as a team and challenge us. And they have all these assumptions that they're working through. And I love putting students in that position because it's rarely that we actually work through the assumptions that we make, not only externally, but internally. It's very rare that we actually sit with ourselves and deal with ourselves and have the courage to get rid of all assumptions, all expectations, and just simply be okay with where we are, who we are, and why we are. And so week 10 or 11 rolls around every year. For 8 to 10 years now I've done this. And finally the session comes where I say, you can ask me a question about myself or about life. And they'll ask all of these great questions, and then they finally get to know me. And it's almost like you can see on some of their faces, they're going, oh, that makes sense now. So it's like affirmation of what they've learned and contestment against what they assumed. And oftentimes what I'll do, depending on their reaction, is then I'll follow that up with, when I first walked in this room 8 to 10 weeks ago, what were your assumptions? The interesting thing is I've asked that question to literally hundreds and hundreds of kids, and almost every time it's the same answers. So it's almost like we all have this psychological preset that we're going to assume at a same pattern level, which actually tells me that we're writing the stories in our mind at the same pattern level, which actually tells me that there is a very simple, easy way to defeat the audacity of assumptions. And that simple, easy solution, my brothers and sisters, is this: courage. It takes courage to, rather than assume, to actually engage. It takes courage to, rather than listen to the voices in my mind tell me what they assume, to sit with myself and find myself and be okay with myself. The solution to defeating assumptions is very simple: courage. I believe that assumptions, the audacity of assumptions, the path of assuming, has a fork in the road. And the fork in the road says that I'm going to continue to write the stories that assumptions have inspired. The left fork in the road says that I'm going to continue following the path of these created stories of my mind of I could never do it, or I'll never be that good, or I'll never be that pretty, or I'll never be that popular, or I could never achieve that in life. You could follow that path and project that onto others. But the other fork in the road of the audacity of assumptions is curiosity. Curiosity looks like this: I assume this about someone else or myself, and now I'm going to explore that assumption. I'm going to engage that thought process with activity, with actual interaction, and with the relationship with myself and with others. So you can follow the path of allowing the audacity of assumptions to feed your soul, or you could follow the path of allowing the audacity of assumptions to open the door to curiosity and to courage. Because we all assume, don't we? The question is, what will those assumptions make of you?